Hello, my name is SupatPasupa. Today I would like to present Agile project presentation for the topic of software business trends. For the agenda that I would like to talk today, the first I will introduce you to the software business environment, and then I will go back into the history about the software business and let you know about the timeline. And then we will go to the open source software community and developers. And then we look at the business of the open source software model. And lastly, I will talk about the trend in software business. First of all, I would like to talk about the introduction of the software business back into many years ago. Since the inception of the software business, at that time, we usually pay for the software such as Microsoft Windows operating system or Adobe Photoshop or Autodesk AutoCAD software, and a lot of many softwares in the past that we have to pay before we can use them, and those companies charge a lot of money for this software. But now there is another trend in the software business that catching up, and that is the open source software. In this report presentation, we will look at the business models between these two software business models and their future. When we talk about the future, and when you look at the Microsoft Word application, this was the future ones in the past. And now we have a lot of applications to use in place of the Microsoft Word that we had to pay. And there are a lot of like Google Docs and a lot of software for the Word application. So go back in time, we will look at the software business timeline. And in 1972, the SAP company was founded, and this company was started by formerly IBM employees, and now they are a very large enterprise software business, or they call the ERP software. Then in 1975, Microsoft company was founded by Bill Gates and Paul Allen, and the first product from Microsoft was basic programming language interpreter for Altair 8800 microcomputer, which I don't know as well. And then in 1977, Oracle software was developed by Larry Ellison, and that time Larry Ellison was contracted by the CIA to develop a database program. And in 1978, it was the first accounting software, Peachtree, that is the first software business for microcomputer. And this is roughly the origin of the software business. And then we look at the open source software timeline. In 1983, Richard Stallman created a free open source software. It's called the GNU project. And then that project was later became Linux. In 1991, Linus Torvalds started Linux company, and it started the Linux kernel. In 1995, Robert McCool created the first version of Apache web server. And in 2004, Mozilla Firefox, the first open source web browser, was originated from the Mozilla project. When we talk about the open source software, some of them thought that they are the free software, but actually the free and open source software are different. They are quite similar in nature, but when we look at them, really they are not the same. The free software usually give people to use or use the software for free, but the company did not give people to access to the code. On the other hand, the open source software give the user or the developer access to the code. So these are the main difference in the free and open source software. And usually we call them open source, but they have officially named as FROST. And FROST stands for Freely Licensed Open Source Software. So the open source software has become so many very popular. So now there are more open source developers than enterprise developers in the corporate. So we can see freelance programmer working in the cafe, and most of the open source developers, they are working for free to contribute to the software, to the open source software, and only some of them can earn money from the support program. So you may wonder why they are so loved with the open source and can even program and do the coding for free. And there are some items that attracts them. First, the freedom. Open source software gives them freedom to contribute to the code. They can look at the code and work at the code freely. And the software cost is free or nothing at all if they use for the developer, the development purpose. And those developers, they uh, have their own community to share. So it it's a place that they can feel that they belong to together. And and when they work at their own view, they can create and produce a quality software. And this software can be updated more frequent than the enterprise software because there are more developers and they can work most of the time and contribute to the development of the open source software compared to the enterprise software that has more limited resources with the open source developers. But if they work for free, how do they make money? How do open source software company make money? Actually, there are ways that this software company can make money. For example, uh, the software company will create different versions of the program. For example, the MongoDB, this is the database company. They can have the community edition. That is the free software. But if the corporate want to use this kind of program, they can choose the enterprise edition that they have to pay for it. So in this way, a quality software will be given for the money. Another example for Ada Core. This company has the GNet Pro software. It's the programming environment to develop software. So Ada Core create three tiers of the program. First is the assurance. Second is the enterprise. And third is the community. So the community is the free software for developer, for hobbyists, and for students, the same as MongoDB. And they have the enterprise version that the corporate if they want to use this version, they have to pay. So it's a commercial version. But the benefits of uh, this version is the service and features. Usually, the paid version will provide more features such as online support, expert support, any kind of support, and also more features in the software compared to the free version. As well as Red Hat, they have the subscription model that give the user a subscription options, and those options are like the technical support, the security resources, the partner ecosystem, and supported life cycles of the product, and the product roadmaps, and proactive analytics, for example. So this kind of enhanced features of the product will be more valuable to the user like corporate that wants more feature and more support. So these are some examples that the open source software can make money in today's environment. And then we want to look into the future. What are the trends and the model that the software business future is going to? But it's not the far future from now because it already happened. In June 2018, Microsoft acquired GitHub for 7.5 billion. And Microsoft is the traditional proprietary company which we have to pay to use their software such as Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Office, for example. And they want to gain and to have more exposure into the open source area. So they bought GitHub. And not only Microsoft, the big company, another big company as well, the IBM. In July 2019, IBM bought Red Hat for 34 billion, and it's the most expensive acquisition of the open source software company up to date. And not only the Microsoft and IBM, there are so many other companies, and I will give some more examples. For example, Salesforce bought Microsoft for 6.5 billion. Adobe acquired Magento for 1.7 billion, and EQT Partners acquired SUSE for 2.5 billion. And so we don't have to wonder why the traditional software company pay so many open source software. We can conclude that the open source software business model will be a changing landscape of the software business. So traditional software players like IBM or Microsoft, Adobe, and many more want to have more exposure into the open source software area. So they try, if they cannot develop their own, they will look to other lucrative companies, open source software companies to buy. And so we will see that many more software business model will change into the open source software. And that's all of my presentation for today. Thank you very much for your attention. These are the references that I have been researched for this presentation. Thank you.